My name is Ernestine, and I am 32 years old. I grew up in a small town in Montana where life was simple and people were genuine. When I got engaged to Derek, I believed my wedding day would be the happiest moment of my life. But I never imagined that his family would turn that sacred day into my deepest wound. They laughed at my father, calling him a poor old man who did not belong among successful people. What they did not know was that this quiet man in his worn flannel shirt was hiding a secret that would change everything. Before we dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and if stories about family, love, and unexpected twists resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. Now let me take you back to the beginning to show you how I met Derek and why I thought he was the one for me. To understand how I ended up standing in that ballroom watching my father being humiliated, I need to tell you about where I came from and how Derek entered my life. I grew up in Whitehall, Montana, a tiny town with fewer than 2,000 residents. Everyone knew everyone, and we measured wealth not in dollars, but in kindness and community. My father, Harold, raised me alone after my mother passed away from cancer when I was just 12 years old. That loss shaped both of us in ways I still discover today. My father never remarried. Instead, he poured every ounce of his love into raising me, teaching me values that would later become my armor. Harold was always a mystery when it came to his work. He traveled frequently, sometimes disappearing for a week or two on what he called business trips. When I asked what he did, he would smile and say something vague like managing some investments or handling property matters. He drove an old pickup truck, wore flannel shirts and faded jeans, and lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town. I never questioned our lifestyle because we had everything we needed: food on the table, a warm home, and most importantly, each other. My father taught me that a person's worth is never measured by their bank account or the brand of their clothes. He used to say that character reveals itself in how people treat those who can do nothing for them. I carried those words with me through high school, through college on a full scholarship, and into my adult life in Denver, where I built a career in marketing. I was 29 when I met Derek at a conference that brought together marketing professionals and financial investors. He was 32 at the time, working as a senior analyst at an investment firm downtown. When he approached me during the networking hour, I was immediately drawn to his confidence and the way he seemed genuinely interested in my work rather than just making small talk. Our first conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. Derek asked about my campaigns, my creative process, and my goals for the future. Not once did he brag about his own achievements or try to impress me with his credentials. When he asked for my phone number, I gave it to him without hesitation. Our early dates felt like something out of a romantic movie. Derek took me to restaurants I chose, never pushing for expensive places or making me feel like I needed to match some standard. When I mentioned that I preferred casual dinners over fancy establishments, he smiled and said that was refreshing. He told me that most women he dated expected 5-star restaurants and designer gifts. I told him I was not most women. 6 months into our relationship, Derek proposed on a hiking trail in the Rocky Mountains. The sun was setting behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. When he got down on one knee and asked me to spend my life with him, I said yes, without a moment of doubt. I called my father that night, barely able to contain my excitement. Harold was happy for me, but I sensed something in his voice. A slight hesitation, perhaps, or maybe it was just the connection. He said he wanted to meet Derek to shake the hand of the man who would be taking care of his little girl. I arranged for them to meet in Denver the following month. When Harold arrived, he came in his old pickup truck, the same one he had driven since I was a teenager. He wore his usual flannel shirt, clean, but clearly not new, paired with jeans that had seen better days. Derek met us at a restaurant downtown, and I noticed the way his eyes traveled over my father's appearance. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. Dinner went smoothly on the surface. Harold talked about life in Montana, about raising me alone, about the community that helped him after my mother passed. He was warm and genuine, sharing stories that made Derek laugh and nod politely. When Derek asked what Harold did for a living, my father gave his usual vague answer about managing some investments and overseeing a few small ventures. Derek did not press further, and I appreciated what I thought was respect for my father's privacy. After Harold left to drive back to Montana, Derek turned to me and said, "Your father is interesting, very down to earth." At the time, I took it as a compliment. Looking back, I should have heard the subtle condescension that laced his words. But love has a way of making us blind to the things we do not want to see. I was so happy, so certain that I had found my person, that I brushed aside the tiny voice whispering warnings in my ear. I would soon learn that voice was trying to protect me from heartbreak I could not yet imagine. The first time I visited Derek's family home, I understood that I was entering a completely different world from the one I knew. Derek drove us through Cherry Hills Village, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Colorado. The houses grew larger with every turn until we pulled into a driveway that seemed to stretch forever. The Pemberton estate was a 7,000-square-foot mansion with manicured lawns, a swimming pool visible behind iron gates, and a garage that housed 5 luxury vehicles. I felt my stomach tighten as we approached the front door. Derek's parents were waiting in the foyer. Richard Pemberton was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of posture that suggested he had never bent for anyone in his life. He owned 3 high-end car dealerships across Colorado, and his handshake was firm enough to remind you of his success. Judith Pemberton had been a local beauty queen in her youth, and she carried herself with the awareness of someone who believed the world should still be watching her. She wore diamonds at her ears and neck, even for a casual family dinner. Derek's younger sister, Sloane, emerged from somewhere deeper in the house. She was 28, working in fashion, though I would later learn her position was largely funded by her father's connections. She looked me up and down with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Behind her came Preston, Derek's younger brother, who worked at his father's dealerships and seemed to view the world through a lens of smug amusement. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have fit my father's entire house. As we ate, Judith began asking questions about my background. I answered honestly, telling them about Whitehall, about growing up in Montana, about my father raising me alone. Judith's eyebrows rose slightly. "Montana," she said. "How charming. And what does your father do out there ranching?" I explained that my father handled various investments and property management. "Nothing too exciting," I added, trying to keep things light. Sloane leaned forward. "So he is like a farmer. Or does he work on a ranch?" "There is nothing wrong with honest labor, you know." Her tone suggested otherwise. Richard asked about assets, any significant property, land holdings. In his world, these were the metrics that mattered. I told them my father had a small house and some land, nothing remarkable. Preston snorted quietly into his wine glass. "Land in Montana," he muttered. "Probably not worth much." I glanced at Derek, expecting him to say something to redirect the conversation or defend my family. Instead, he simply smiled and reached for more bread. He said nothing. After dinner, when we were alone in his car, I told Derek that I felt uncomfortable with some of the questions. He waved his hand dismissively. "They are like that with everyone," he said. "Do not take it personally. They were just curious about you." I wanted to believe him. I told myself that every family has their quirks, that first meetings are always awkward. That night, I called my father just to hear his voice. He asked if everything was all right, and I told him, yes, everything was fine. I did not want him to worry. But over the following months, as I spent more time with the Pembertons, a pattern emerged that I could not ignore. Every gathering included subtle jabs about my background. Judith would mention how nice it must be for me to experience fine dining for once. Sloane would ask if I missed the simple country life. Preston would make jokes about farmers and cowboys that were clearly directed at my absent father. One evening, Judith pulled me aside and said, "I hope your father has something appropriate to wear to the wedding. We would not want him to feel out of place among our guests." I smiled through gritted teeth and assured her he would be fine. Sloane was even more direct. "You should really help your father go shopping before the wedding day. Maybe get him a proper suit. You do not want him embarrassing the family photos." Each comment was a small cut, but cuts accumulate. And through it all, Derek remained silent. When I confronted him about it, he told me I was being too sensitive, that his family meant well, that I needed to give them time to warm up to me. I began to wonder if I was the problem. Maybe I was too touchy about my background. Maybe coming from a small town had made me defensive. I pushed my doubts down and focused on the wedding planning ahead. But late at night, when Derek was asleep beside me, I would lie awake and remember my father's words. Those who truly love you will respect you and your family. I was starting to realize that respect was something the Pembertons did not know how to give. The moment I said yes to Derek's proposal, I lost control of my own wedding. Judith announced, not suggested, that the ceremony and reception would be held at the Cherry Hills Country Club. It was the most prestigious venue in Denver where membership costs more per year than most people earn. She had already contacted the event coordinator before even asking my opinion. When I mentioned that I had envisioned something smaller and more intimate, Derek's face fell. He explained that his family had certain expectations. His parents had business associates to impress clients to entertain. The wedding was not just about us, it was about the Pemberton image. I asked if we could at least discuss alternatives. Derek sighed and said we could talk about it later, but later never came. Within a week, Judith had booked the venue, hired a planner, and begun creating the guest list. That guest list became another battlefield. Judith planned to invite 300 guests. Business partners, country club members, society friends, political connections. When I asked how many people I could invite from my side, she looked at me with what might have been pity. "Oh, honey," she said, "I think we can accommodate about 20 for your group. Your family is small anyway, right? That should be more than enough." 20 people. For my entire life. My father, Aunt Martha, my best friend Danielle, a handful of college friends and colleagues. That was all I was allowed. Richard raised the issue of costs during one of our planning meetings. He looked at me across the table and asked what my father would be contributing to the wedding. I explained that I preferred to handle my own expenses rather than burden my father. Richard chuckled. "I am sure he does not have much to contribute anyway. Do not worry about it. Consider this our gift to your family." The way he said gift made it sound like charity, like they were rescuing me from poverty. Judith nodded along that same pitying expression on her face. "Think of it as us welcoming you into a better life," she added. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but kept my voice steady. I thanked them for their generosity while swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth. When Derek said nothing to correct their assumptions, something inside me cracked just a little more. A few days later, my father called to check on the wedding preparations. He sounded genuinely excited, asking about colors and flowers and whether I had chosen my dress yet. When I gave him vague answers, he paused. "Ernestine," he said gently, "is everything all right?" I assured him everything was perfect, even as tears threatened to spill down my cheeks. I could not bear to tell him how they talked about him, how they assumed he was some poor rancher who had nothing to offer his daughter, how they treated his existence as something to be embarrassed about. Harold mentioned wanting to help with costs. "I can contribute to the wedding, sweetheart. Just tell me what you need." "No, Dad," I said firmly. "You save your money. I have got this handled." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "There are some things I have been meaning to talk to you about. Important things. But they can wait until after the wedding." I assumed he wanted to have one of our heart-to-heart conversations about marriage and commitment. I told him we would talk soon and ended the call before my voice betrayed me. The dress shopping was another exercise in humiliation. Judith insisted on coming along, bringing Sloan as additional company. We went to an exclusive bridal boutique where the cheapest gown cost more than my monthly salary. Judith selected dress after dress, each one more elaborate than the last. She never once asked what style I preferred. When I tried on a simpler design that actually felt like me, Sloan wrinkled her nose. "That one makes you look wider," she said. "Maybe something with more structure," Judith agreed. "You need something that will photograph well. Remember, these pictures will be seen by very important people." As they continued to critique my body and my choices, I thought about my mother. How different this would have been if she were here. She would have held my hand and told me I was beautiful no matter what I wore. She would have protected me from these women who saw me as a project to be fixed rather than a person to be celebrated. When I finally selected a dress, one that Judith approved of, I felt nothing. No joy, no excitement, just relief that the ordeal was over. That night, I met Danielle for drinks. She had been my best friend since college, and she knew me better than almost anyone. One look at my face told her something was wrong. I told her everything. The comments, the condescension, Derek's silence. I told her how they talked about my father like he was some kind of burden to be tolerated, how they assumed he had nothing because he did not flaunt anything. Danielle listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took my hand and asked me a question that haunted me for days afterward. Is this really the family you want to marry into? I did not have an answer. The morning of my wedding arrived wrapped in golden sunlight that felt like a promise. I woke in my hotel suite surrounded by Danielle and my bridesmaids, all of them buzzing with excitement about the day ahead. For a few precious hours, I allowed myself to believe that everything would be perfect. My father called early, his voice warm through the phone. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said. "Today is your big day. I am so proud of you." I pressed the phone closer to my ear, suddenly desperate to hold on to his voice. "Thank you, Dad. Are you on your way?" "Already dressed and heading out," he replied. "I will see you soon." "And Ernestine, I love you more than you will ever know. I love you too, Dad." After we hung up, I sat with those words wrapped around me like a blanket. My father had been my rock through every storm. When my mother died, he held our small family together through sheer will and endless love. He worked tirelessly, traveled constantly, but never once made me feel like I was not his priority. Every important moment of my life, he was there. Today would be no different. He would walk me down the aisle and hand me to the man I loved, or at least the man I thought I loved. My bridesmaids helped me into my dress, styled my hair, and applied makeup that made me look like a version of myself I barely recognized. By the time we finished, I felt ready to face whatever the day would bring. I had no idea how severely my courage would be tested. Meanwhile, at the Cherry Hills Country Club, my father arrived in his old pickup truck. He had driven 6 hours from Montana, leaving before dawn to make sure he was on time. He wore the best suit he owned, a simple charcoal gray that he had purchased years ago for business meetings. It was clean and pressed, but it was not designer. It did not carry any logo that the Pembertons would recognize. The valet attendant looked at his truck with barely concealed surprise. "Sir, are you here for a delivery?" Harold smiled politely. "No. I am the father of the bride." The young man's face shifted slightly, not quite apologetic, but uncertain. He took the keys and drove the truck to the far end of the parking lot, away from the Bentleys and Mercedes that filled the spaces near the entrance. Richard and Judith were stationed at the club's entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. They wore matching expressions of carefully practiced hospitality. When Harold approached, Judith's smile froze. She looked him up and down, taking in the off-the-rack suit, the simple leather shoes, the absence of any visible wealth. Her eyes lingered on his calloused hands before meeting his face. "You must be Ernestine's father," she said, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. Harold extended his hand. "Yes, I am Harold. It is nice to finally meet you in person, Mrs. Pemberton." Judith took his hand briefly, her fingers barely touching his before pulling back. Richard's handshake was equally dismissive, his eyes already drifting to the next arriving guests behind Harold. As Harold stepped inside, he heard Judith whisper to her husband, "Just look at him. He looks like the gardener showed up for the party." Richard chuckled quietly. "Well, we knew her family was simple. At least he's not wearing overalls." Harold heard every word. He said nothing. He simply continued into the club, his face calm as steps, steady. The cocktail hour was already underway when he entered the main reception area. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Wait staff in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne and elegant appetizers. Everywhere Harold looked, wealth was on display. Designer gowns, expensive watches, diamonds catching the light. He took a glass of water from a passing tray and found a quiet corner to observe. He watched the guests mingle, heard snippets of conversations about stock portfolios and vacation properties. He felt no desire to join them. His only thought was seeing his daughter. Judith found him again this time with a group of her friends in tow. "Ladies," she announced loudly, "this is the father of our newest family member. He came all the way from Montana." She turned to Harold with exaggerated sweetness. "What is it you do out there?" "Harold, cattle, ranching, farming." Before he could answer, she continued, "He manages some land or something. Very rustic." Her friends tittered politely, their eyes assessing him with obvious amusement. One woman leaned in. "How many acres do you have?" "Deer." Harold smiled. "A few." Sloan appeared at his side, champagne flute in hand. "Daddy just bought a 100-acre ranch as an investment property," she announced. "Just for fun, you know. Probably more than your entire spread." Preston joined the gathering, grinning. "What kind of car did you drive here? I thought I saw an antique in the parking lot." Harold met his eyes. "If you mean my pickup truck, yes, that was mine. She has been with me for 20 years. 20 years, Sloan laughed. "I do not keep anything that long. That is longer than some marriages." The group laughed. Harold simply nodded, his expression unchanged. Inside the bridal suite, I had no idea that my father was being treated like an unwelcome guest at his own daughter's wedding. The ceremony was beautiful from a distance. Flowers cascaded from every surface. String musicians played softly as guests took their seats. The Colorado sun streamed through tall windows, casting everything in warm, golden light. When the music changed and I appeared at the back of the aisle, my father was waiting for me. He took my arm and I felt his strength steady me. For a moment, looking at his face, everything else faded away. The Pembertons, the stress, the months of subtle degradation. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "Your mother would be so proud." I blinked back tears and squeezed his arm. "Thank you, Daddy." As we walked down the aisle together, I noticed strange expressions on some of the guests, whispers that I could not quite hear, glances toward my father that seemed almost pitying. I did not understand then. I would understand later. Derek waited at the altar looking handsome in his designer tuxedo. When my father placed my hand in his, I thought I saw everything I wanted in Derek's eyes. Love, commitment, a future together. How wrong I was. The ceremony proceeded. We exchanged vows. We exchanged rings. When the officiant pronounced us married and Derek kissed me, the room erupted in applause. For one shining moment, I was purely, completely happy. The reception began in the grand ballroom. 300 guests found their seats at tables draped in silk. Waitstaff poured champagne. A live band played jazz standards. It was everything Judith had planned, perfect and impressive and absolutely without soul. Richard Pemberton stood to give the first toast. He held his champagne flute high, commanding the room's attention with the ease of a man accustomed to being heard. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight we celebrate the union of my son, Derek, with his lovely bride, Ernestine." He paused, his eyes finding me across the room. "We are so pleased that Derek found someone so grounded, someone who appreciates the finer things that our family can offer." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. I felt my cheeks flush. Richard continued, "And of course we welcome Ernestine's family into ours. Her father, Harold, traveled all the way from rural Montana to be with us today." He gestured toward where my father sat, and 300 pairs of eyes turned to examine him. "Harold is a simple man with simple values. We hope he feels comfortable here among, shall we say, people of achievement." The implication was unmistakable. My father was being called a failure in front of everyone I knew, and Derek, my husband of less than an hour, sat beside me and said nothing. The toast continued with more subtle insults disguised as compliments. By the time Richard raised his glass to conclude, I was shaking with suppressed rage. Dinner was served, but I could not eat. I watched helplessly as Judith made her way to my father's table. She spoke loudly enough for surrounding guests to hear. "Harold," she said with mock concern, "are you familiar with this type of cuisine? I can have the kitchen prepare something simpler if you need." My father smiled gracefully. "Thank you, but I am fine." Sloane appeared next, weaving through tables until she reached his side. She carried a glass of red wine which she gestured with carelessly. "You simply must try this vintage," she insisted. "It costs more than your truck, I imagine." As she leaned in to hand him the glass, her arm jerked. Red wine splashed across my father's suit jacket, spreading across the gray fabric like a wound. "Oh my goodness," Sloane exclaimed, not sounding sorry at all. "I am so clumsy. But really, do not worry. That suit probably was not worth much anyway. I saw it happen from across the room. I started to rise to go to my father to defend him to throw Sloane out of my wedding. But Derek's hand closed on my wrist. "Sit down," he hissed. "Do not make a scene." I stared at him. "Did you see what she did?" "It was an accident," he said. "Your father is fine. Do not embarrass my family. Your family is embarrassing me." I shot back. "They have been humiliating my father all day." Derek sighed, the sound of someone dealing with an unreasonable child. "Look, your dad is different. He does not fit in here. Everyone can see that. Just let it go and try to enjoy your wedding." Something broke inside me in that moment. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet snapping of the thread that had been holding my denial together. But the worst was yet to come. Preston rose from his seat, tapping his glass for attention. He had the satisfied look of someone about to deliver what he thought was a clever performance. "I want to say a few words about our new in-law," he announced. "Harold, father of the bride, all the way from the wilds of Montana." The room quieted. My father looked up, his face still composed. Now Harold could not give his daughter much in terms of material things, Preston continued, but at least he gave her humility, the ability to be grateful for what others provide. Snickers from some corners of the room. Preston raised his glass. "So Harold, do not worry. From now on, your daughter will be taken care of properly. Our family will give her everything you could not." That was it. The breaking point. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. Every face in the room turned toward me. "Stop it," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "Stop it right now." The music stopped. The servers froze. 300 guests watched as the bride confronted her new in-laws. I stood in the center of that grand ballroom, my white dress suddenly feeling like a costume for a play I no longer wanted to perform. Every eye was on me, and for the first time all day, I did not care about appearances. "You have been mocking my father since he walked through the door," I said, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through me. "You have called him poor. You have called him simple. You have treated him like something to be ashamed of." Judith started to speak. "Ernestine, dear, this is hardly the place." "No," I cut her off. "This is exactly the place. This is my wedding, and you have spent it humiliating the man who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me, who taught me what love and dignity actually look like." I turned to face Derek, and the look in my eyes made him shrink back. "And you," I continued, "you sat there and said nothing. Your family has been degrading my father for months, and you never once defended him, never once told them to stop. You told me I was being too sensitive." Derek started reaching for my hand. I stepped away from him. "A man who will not stand up for your family will not stand up for you. I should have seen that sooner." Richard cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "This is quite enough drama for one evening. Perhaps we should all calm down and—" But he never finished his sentence. From the corner of the room, a woman stood up. She was in her late 50s, elegant in an understated navy dress. Her name was Martha, and she was my father's sister. She had been sitting quietly all evening, watching everything unfold. I think Martha said clearly that it is time everyone in this room learned the truth. She walked toward the center of the room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The guests parted before her with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Judith scoffed. "And who exactly are you?" Martha stopped and smiled. "I am Martha Greenfield, Harold's older sister, and I have watched this family insult my brother all evening based on assumptions that are spectacularly wrong." She turned to address the room. "You see my brother sitting there in his simple suit, and you think you know his story. You think he is some poor farmer from nowhere, Montana, who is lucky his daughter married into money." Martha paused, letting the silence stretch. "Harold owns Greenfield Energy Corporation. Perhaps some of you have heard of it. We are one of the largest renewable energy companies in the United States." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw Richard's face go pale. Martha continued, "In addition to the energy company, Harold holds commercial real estate in 12 states, shopping centers, office buildings, residential developments. His net worth as of last quarter is approximately $3 billion. The murmur became a roar of whispered shock. Judith gripped the back of a chair as if she might fall. Sloane's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. "That is impossible," Richard said, his voice cracking. "If he were that wealthy, why would he live like that?" A man rose from a table near the back. He was distinguished, silver-haired, wearing a suit that even the Pembertons would recognize as expensive. He walked forward with the confidence of someone accustomed to boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. "I am Vincent Calloway," he said. "I have been Harold's attorney for 22 years. Everything Martha has said is accurate. Harold Greenfield is one of the wealthiest individuals in the Rocky Mountain region. He is also one of our most significant philanthropists, having donated over $200 million to various causes." The room fell into stunned silence. Then my father stood. He moved slowly, deliberately, his wine-stained jacket still marking him as the victim of Sloane's cruelty. But something had shifted. The way he held himself now commanded attention in a way that wealth could not buy. He looked at the Pemberton family, one by one. "I have lived simply my entire life," he said, his voice calm and clear, "not because I had to, because I chose to. I watched my wife die of cancer when our daughter was 12 years old. That experience taught me that material things mean nothing. Love means everything." He turned to face me, and his eyes were filled with tenderness. "I raised Ernestine without telling her about our family's wealth because I wanted her to be loved for who she is, not for what she could inherit. I wanted her to build her own strength, her own character, her own success." His gaze shifted back to the Pembertons. I wanted to see how the people in her life would treat her, how they would treat me. I thought that if they could respect us without knowing about the money, they were worthy of her. Harold's voice dropped lower, harder. "Tonight you showed me exactly who you are. You mocked a man you believed had nothing. You made my daughter feel ashamed of her father on her wedding day. You measured human worth in dollars and designer labels." He shook his head slowly. "In my experience, the people who care most about appearing wealthy are often the ones with the emptiest souls." Richard stepped forward, his face now flushed with desperate friendliness. "Harold, I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We never meant to." Harold raised his hand and Richard fell silent. "I heard every word you said about me tonight. Every whispered insult, every condescending comment about my truck, my suit, my life. There has been no misunderstanding. I understand you perfectly." He turned to me once more. "Ernestine, sweetheart, the choice is yours, but know that whatever you decide, I am proud of you. You stood up. You demanded respect. That took more courage than anything money could buy." I looked at Derek. My husband of perhaps 2 hours. He stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions I could not read. Shock, embarrassment, maybe even shame. "Derek," I said quietly, "did you know that they were treating my father this way all day?" He swallowed hard. I thought... I waited. "I thought it was harmless," he finally said. "I did not think." That was all I needed to hear. I reached down and slowly pulled the wedding ring from my finger. The diamond caught the light as I placed it on the table in front of me. "You did not think my father deserved to be defended," I said. "You did not think my feelings mattered. You did not think." I stepped back from him. I cannot build a life with someone who watches his family tear mine apart and calls it harmless. "Ernestine Derrick reached for me, please. We can work this out. I am sorry. I will talk to my family. Things will be different." I shook my head. "The time for different was before you let them humiliate my father on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. The time for different was every moment you chose silence over standing beside me." I walked to my father and took his arm. "Dad," I said, "let us go home." Harold nodded. He looked at the Pemberton family one final time. "I hope someday you learn that the true measure of a person has nothing to do with their net worth. It is how they treat others when there is nothing to be gained." We walked toward the exit together. Behind us, I heard chaos erupting, Judith's voice rising in hysterical denial, Richard demanding that someone stop us, Sloane crying about how unfair this all was. But I did not look back. At the doorway, Danielle caught up with us. She threw her arms around me, tears streaming down her face. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "That was the bravest thing I have ever seen." I hugged her back. "Thank you for being here, for always being honest with me." She pulled back and smiled through her tears. "I will call you tomorrow. Now go. Go home with your dad." As we stepped out into the cool Colorado evening, I took a deep breath of fresh air. The stars were just beginning to appear above the mountains. Somewhere behind those doors, my marriage was dissolving before it had truly begun. But walking beside my father toward his old pickup truck, I felt something I had not felt in months: freedom. The drive back to Montana took 6 hours. We stopped once for coffee and gas, but otherwise we drove in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that exists between people who do not need words to communicate. When we finally pulled up to my father's modest house, the sun was just rising over the mountains. The light painted everything in shades of pink and gold, and I stood in the driveway remembering all the mornings I had watched this same sunrise as a child. The first weeks were hard. I will not pretend otherwise. I cried more than I thought possible. I replayed every moment of the wedding, every cruel comment, every sign I had ignored during my relationship with Derek. I questioned everything. Had I been too hasty? Should I have given him another chance? Was I wrong to leave my father never tried to answer these questions for me? He simply made sure I ate, made sure I slept, and sat with me on the porch when I needed company. He told me stories about my mother, about how they met, about how she taught him that love is patient and kind and never keeps score. One evening, about 2 weeks after the wedding, Harold sat down beside me and said it was time to show me something. We drove for nearly an hour before arriving at a sprawling complex of buildings I had never seen before. Wind turbines dotted the hills beyond. Solar panels gleamed on every rooftop. "This is Greenfield Energy Headquarters," my father said. "I started this company 30 years ago with a small loan and a big idea. Your mother believed in me before anyone else did." I stared at the buildings, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. He took me on a tour, showed me the research facilities, the manufacturing plants, the offices filled with hundreds of employees. He introduced me to engineers and executives who spoke of him with genuine respect and admiration. "Why did you never tell me?" I finally asked. He thought for a long moment before answering. "When your mother was sick, she made me promise something. She said she wanted you to grow up knowing that your worth comes from who you are, not what you have. She was afraid that wealth would distort your values, make you someone she would not recognize." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "So I kept the money separate from our daily life. I let you work for scholarships, let you build your own career. I wanted you to discover your own strength. I thought about all the times I had struggled, worked extra shifts, worried about bills, and my father could have made all of it disappear with a single check. Are you angry with me?" he asked quietly. I considered the question honestly. No, I finally said. I think I understand. And I think Mom was right. Over the following months, I began to heal. I started working with my father, learning about the business that would one day be mine. I reconnected with old friends from high school. I took up hiking again, spending hours in the mountains that had shaped my childhood. Danielle visited often, flying in from Denver whenever she could. We talked about everything except the wedding, until one day we talked about nothing else. She told me that the Pemberton family had become the subject of considerable gossip after the events of that night. Their social standing had taken a significant hit. She also told me that Derek had tried to reach out several times. He had sent letters and emails and texts. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to try again. I never responded. Some bridges are not meant to be rebuilt. About a year after the wedding that was not, I received news that the Pemberton car dealerships were struggling. A combination of bad investments and declining sales had put them in financial difficulty. Derek had been forced to sell his apartment and move back in with his parents. I felt nothing when I heard this. No satisfaction, no pity, just peace. That same week, I made a significant donation to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students, the kind of students who, like me, had to work for everything they achieved. It felt like the right use of resources I was only beginning to understand. One evening, I sat on the porch with my father watching the sunset. The mountains were turning purple in the fading light, and somewhere in the valley below, cattle were lowing. Dad, I said, thank you. For what, sweetheart? For teaching me what matters. For showing me that love is not about what someone can give you. It is about how they make you feel, how they treat you when no one is watching, how they defend you when it costs them something. Harold smiled. You learned that yourself. I just tried not to get in the way. We sat in comfortable silence until the stars appeared. I wrote in my journal that night, words that had been forming in my heart for months. Never let anyone make you feel small because of what you have or do not have. Your value is not determined by your bank account. Your value is determined by how you love, how you forgive, how you stand up when standing up is hard. The people who judge others by their possessions will never find true happiness. They will always be chasing the next status symbol, the next social triumph, the next way to prove they are better than someone else. And they will never understand that in all that chasing, they are running away from the only things that matter. My father taught me that lesson not through words, but through example. He could have lived in mansions. He could have worn designer clothes. He could have impressed the world with his wealth. Instead, he drove an old truck and wore flannel shirts and showed kindness to everyone he met, regardless of their status. That is true wealth. That is what I want to build my life upon. If you are watching this and you have been made to feel less than because of where you come from or what you have, please hear me. You are enough. You have always been enough. The people who cannot see your worth are blinded by their own emptiness. And if you are in a relationship where your partner does not defend you, where they allow others to diminish you, where they choose peace with their family over justice for you, you deserve better. You deserve someone who will stand beside you even when it is uncomfortable, especially when it is uncomfortable. My wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. In a way it was, because it was the day I finally stopped accepting less than I deserved. It was the day I chose myself. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone judged you unfairly based on appearances? Have you ever had to walk away from something that looked perfect on the outside but was broken within? Share your story in the comments below. Let us support each other. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they are not alone. And if you have not already, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might be in a situation where they are being diminished. Sometimes knowing that others have walked this path makes all the difference. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you a life filled with people who see your true worth and love you not for what you have, but for who you are. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.